Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yud Beis, Amud Beis, at the very top. In regards to a chotzer midi araisa, a chotzer that has its proper walls is considered to be a reshus hayochid. Nonetheless, the Chachamim were concerned if a person were to carry from the bayis to the chotzer, or vice versa, he might also carry into the reshus harabim. So therefore, they enacted what's required as a Eruv Chatzeros. Eruv Chatzeros means that the various batim that are using the Chatzer, they combine together through this Eruv, and they put a loaf of bread from each bayis into one of the other batim. Then they are now combined as one entity, and therefore they can now carry between the bayis and the chotzer and vice versa. Similarly, in regards to a mavui, even after the mavui has its proper lechi or kara, whatever is required to then fix the adjustment to make you permitted to carry in the mavui, nonetheless, a mavui requires a shituf mavos. Shituf mavos means that just like we said by a chotzer, there's an eruv chatzeros, so too by a mavui, the Chacham were concerned, even though midiaraisa, the mavui may be considered to be a reshus hayochid, but nonetheless, they were concerned if one were then carry within the mavui, from the mavui to the chotzer, or the chotzer back to the mavui, he may carry in the reshus harabim. So therefore they required what's called a shituv mavos, similar to the eruv chatzeros, whereby each chotzer puts a certain amount of food into one of the batim or one of the chatzeros, and that again combines all of those chatzeros with the mavui, permitting one to carry with the proper adjustments in that mavui. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yehuda, mavui shelo nishtatfu boy, a mavui that was not done shituf mavos, hichshiru belechi. They adjusted it with a lechi. Hazorek lesoichoy chayev. One who throws an object from the reshus harabim into that mavui is going to be chayev for transferring an object, a hachanos, into the reshus hayochid. Hechshiroi bekara. If they adjusted the mavui with a kara, with a crossbeam, hazorek lesoichoy potter. One who throws from the reshus harabim into the mavui would be potter. Ask the Gemara maskif lo Rav Sheshes. The only reason is because they didn't do a shituf mavos. That's why when you put the crossbeam, he's going to be potter from throwing from the shus harabim into that mavui. Had it did have a shituf mavos, where you're going to say that's going to be chayiv. In other words, why is it that the shituf mavos is maila or marid? What's significant about the mavui is whether it's considered to be a reshus hayochid or not, based on its walls. Answers the Gemara, or Gemara continues to ask, V'chikikar zu also oisav reshus hayochid or reshus harabim? Is this kikar, this loaf of bread that makes the shituv mavos, going to then make it so that it's considered to be a reshus hayochid? V'hatanya, behold, it states in the Braiso, Chatzeros shel rabim umuvois she'enon mufuloshin. If you have chatzeros that are used by the rabbi, meaning many batim, or you have mavos that are not mefuloshim, they are closed in three sides, only open on one side of the reshus harabim. Bein irvu, bein lo irvu, hazarek lesoichen chayiv. Whether an eruv is made or a shituv mavos is made, still one will be chayiv for transferring an object from the reshus harabim into that chotzer, into that mavui. So it doesn't make a difference whether there's a shituf mavos or not a shituf mavos. Answers the Gemara, Eli itmar hachi itmar. What Rav Yehuda said is as follows: Om Rav Yehuda mavui she'eino roi l'shituf. If it's a mavui that is mefulash, open on two ends of the reshus harabim, which means it's not roi to make a shituf mavos, then hechshiru belechi. If you then adjusted it with a lechi, hazar l'soiche chayiv. Hichshiu bekara hazar l'soiche potter. Whereby, if you adjust it with a lechi, that would then give it its fourth wall. Whereby, if you throw an object from the shus rabim to the shus of the mavui, is going to be a transferring a deraisa malacha of hachnasa. Whereas if you only made a kara, then you're only left with 3 walls still, and that's not going to be mechayiv for the transferring of the object. In other words, the Gemara understands that a Reshus HaYachid is defined as 4 walls, and whereby the lechi will make the 4th wall. Alma kesover lechi mishum mechitza v'kara mishum heker. So it comes out that we hold over here, we're saying, that a lechi adjusts that open wall to make it into a mechitza, into a 4th wall, whereas a kara is only there as a heker. V'chein Omar Rabbe, similarly Rabbe said, lechi mishum mechitza v'kara mishum heker. The lechi is going to then make an adjustment causing there to be a halachic wall, whereas a kara crossbeam merely works as a heker to those who are in the mavui, or those who are outside the mavui. V'Rava Omar, and Rava said, echad zeh ve'echad zeh mishum heker. Both this and that, both the lechi and the kara, are just a heker. Eisvei Rabbi Yaakov bar Abba l'Rava, he asked on Rava, if they're both indeed a heker, even a lechi, then hazarek lemavui, yesh loy lechi chayiv, ein lo lechi potter. Why does it say in this brisa that if you throw into a mavui that has a lechi, you're going to be chayiv, but if it doesn't have a lechi, you'll be potter? Here the assumption is that the lechi, of course, is making a wall. So how can you say it's only a heker, not a wall? Hachi ka'amar. This is what you have to say is meant when it's stated in the brisa. Eino tzorich ela lechi hazarek l'soicha chayiv. Means that if it's going to be a mavui that is sasum, that's what it means over here when it's talking about a mavui that's enclosed on 3 walls, then it has a lechi hazarek l'soicha chayiv. Then one who throws it into such a mavui is going to be chayiv. Lechi v'dover acher. But if it's a mavui that's mefulash, open on 2 ends, whereby you need to put a lechi on one side and a tzuras hapesach on the other side, hazarik lesoichai potter. Then hazarik lesoichai is going to be potter. So it comes out over here, according to this brisa, the way we're explaining it is that the lechi that we're talking about, that makes it so it's chayiv for transferring, is because you already have 3 walls. Because it's a mavi that is sasum. Whereas that which we said, if you transfer into a mavi mafulash, then even if it has a lechi, it's going to be potter. Eisvei asked the Gemara, if indeed a lechi is not considered to be a mechita but a heker, asked the Gemara, yeser al kain. It states in the brisa that when you have a gesher, for example, a bridge that's overhead, and you're walking the Reshus HaRabim with the bridge overhead, and there are 2 walls on either side, so it's considered to be, according to Rabbi Yehuda, enough to permit a person to walk in that Reshus HaRabim, even though it's open on both sides, like a mefulash. Rabbi Yehuda goes on to say, yeser al kain, even moreover, Rabbi Yehuda mishayesh lo shnei batim. If a person has 2 houses, he has 2 houses that are across from one another with a Reshus HaRabim that is going in between them. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda, Misha yesh lo shnei batim b'shnei tzidei Reshus HaRabim, oise lechi mikan v'lechi mikan. You can put a lechi on both sides of one of the houses, and that will permit you, he says, to use the space in between. And you can go ahead and carry in between, even though that's a Reshus HaRabim, but it's because you've now then made it into a Reshus HaYachid, ayidei the lechim, so therefore you can go ahead and use that space. Amuloi, the sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, Ein ma'arvin Reshus HaRabim bekach. We do not permit making an eruv in a Reshus HaRabim. In other words, you can't make an adjustment to permit carrying in a Reshus HaRabim. So here we see that Rabbi Yehuda says that even though you put a lechi, the lechi itself is a mechitza, because the lechim are allowing you to then have the permissibility to walk in between the houses, which is in the Reshus HaRabim, because the lechi that you put apparently on each side makes a mechitza. So because of that, you're able to carry. So we see that lechi is not a heker, but rather a mechitza. Answers the Gemara, no hasom, because Rabbi Yehuda shtei mechitza is the araisa. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that two mechitzos, in this case we're talking about the batim that are facing one another, they have considered to be two mechitzos. That itself is making a reshus hayachid, and therefore that's sufficient. The lechi is only permitting a person midrabanan. That's not necessary in regards to making a reshus hayachid. So therefore it comes out that even the lechi is only a heker according to this, and not necessarily a mechitza. Rav Yehuda Marav, the Gemara says weiter, there is the name of Rav, Mavui she'arkoi kerachboi. If you have a mavui that has a square type of dimension, eino nitar belechi mashu, then it's not permissible to use a lechi that is just a mashu. Rav Chia bar Ashi Marav, Mavui she'arkoi kerachboi, eino nitar bekarach tefach. If you have a squared mavui, that means the length of the mavui is the same as the width of the mavui. So he says similarly that you cannot use a kara to then matir the tiltul in that mavui. In other words, they're both saying the same thing. They're both saying that if it's going to be a square mavui, then it's going to have then the din of a chatzir, not as a mavui. And everyone had the leniency of using either a lechi or a kara. Rabbi Zeira, kama mechuvanim shmaitze desabe. How straight and upright are the halachic statements of the elderly sages, referring to the two statements that were just made, that if it's going to be a square mavui, then it's going to have the din of a chatzir, and therefore won't be able to be adjusted with just a lechi or a kara alone. Kivin da arka kerach by havalecha chatzir. Since the length and the width are the same in the mavui, then it has the same din as a chatzir. V'chatzir eino niteres belechi v'kara ela b'pas arbo. And a chatzir is not going to be permitted with just a lechi or a kara alone. It would require a pas arbo. Omar Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira said, Ikashili, what was difficult for me, however, is hakashali. This would be difficult. Now, I understand the rationale that a mavui that is a square mavui has the same din as a chatzir, because after all, instead of it being the classical mavui, it's more used. It has a more type of usage as a chatzir. In other words, the chatzir, which is more private, whereas a mavui is more public. So therefore, the chatzir has more of a requirement, more stringency than just the mavui. So I understand that if the mavui has the same dimensions as a chatzir, then the din has to be the same. What's not clear to me, he says, however, is lahave hai lechi kepas mashu v'nishtari. In other words, Rabbi Zeira understands at this point that a lechi and a pas are one of the same. The same thing that we say the word lechi in mavui is really interchangeable with the word pas when it comes to a chatzir. They both mean the same thing. So therefore, if you can go ahead and use a pas in a chatzir, you should be able to use the lechi in the mavui. Is one of the same. On that, the Gemara says no. Ishtamite hodam Rav Asi Rabbi Yochanan. It was missing from Reb Zeir's understanding that which Rav Asi said to Rabbi Yochanan. Pas chatzir tzrichin sheyeh bohen arbo. A pas of a chatzir, although we do say it means lechi really, but it means that it's requirement of 4 tfachim. When we call pasi chatzir, it's a format of 4 tfachim. And therefore, that's the difference between the lechi of the mavui, which could be a kol shehu, and the pas of a chatzir, which requires daled tfachim. Omer Rav Nachman naktinon. We have Masara Ezu Mavui Shenita Belechi Vikar. What is a Mavui that is permissible, which is then going to be adjusted by a Lechi or Kara? Kol Sha'arko Yeser Al Rochboi Ubatim V'Chatzir Besuchim L'Soichoi. When you have the Orech, the walls of the Mavui that are going to be greater than the width of the Mavui, and also that there are houses, meaning at least 2 houses that go into the chatzir, and at least 2 chatzers that go into a mavui. Then we'll then be able to adjust the mavui with a lechi or a kara. Ve'ezu chatzir she'eina niteres b'lechi v'kara ela b'pas arba. And what is a chatzir that requires a pas arbo, kosher merubas, all that is going to be squared. So that's the distinction we're making between a mavui and a chotzer. Not only in its types of usage, that normally a mavui is, we call an alleyway that the chatzeros feeds into the mavui, and that the chotzer is the area that the batim go into the chotzer, but we're now defining that the dimensions will be koveh, whether you can use a lechi or a kara, versus using a pas arbo. Ask the Gemara, if it's a chotzer that's only merubas, that requires a pas of dalid, merubas in igula loy. It's specifically because it's a square. That's what makes it so that's going to be chayiv to be a pas dalid. What's unique about a square versus a circle? No, Gemara says hachikam. This is what it meant to say. Iarka yeser al rachbo havale mavi. If the length is going to be greater than the width, then that's what we mean by saying then it's going to be like a mavui and it's not squared. Mavui v'lechi v'kar sagin. Thereby, a mavui then have the din of a mavui where a lechi or kar will be sufficient to adjust it. V'loi hava lo chotzer. But if not, then it'll be a din of a chotzer because it's not going to be where the walls of the length are greater than the walls of the width. The kama, how much greater do the length of the walls have to be more than the width? So Shmuel Meimar, he thought to say adiika pishnayim berochba, that it has to be double the roichav. The roichav is, let's say, 10, then the orech has to be 20 or more. Omar le Rav said, Hochi Omar Chaviv. This is what my uncle, my dear one, my uncle said, referring to Reb Chia. Afilu mashu, even a little bit more, as long as the orech, the walls that are length, are a little bit more than the width, that's enough to be considered to be a mavui.